This is Daryl Henry with the Insurance for Entrepreneurs YouTube channel, where I'm making videos for businesses and social services who are trying to build something great, and it's done by someone that's trying to build something great. Today, I'm going to be talking about what do home health agencies need to know about insurance. There's about 11 coverages here. I'm going to go through them. I'm going to talk through them. I'm going to talk about it in the way that I would talk to a person as if they were calling me on the phone. So the first coverage I'd talk to them about would be property insurance. The exposure here is pretty minimal because in my experience, most home health agencies, they'll rent a small office space in an industrial strip. They may have some desks and some chairs, but most of their work is done in the field. So whereas there's some types of organizations that will own buildings, and I need to be very concerned about whether or not their building is insured to value, home health agencies don't tend to fit that profile. And so in the same bucket is business income and extra expense coverage. I'm going to lump those together. For the most part, home health agencies do their work in people's homes. So there isn't a whole lot of need for insurance inside of a building. There's not a whole lot of personal property. Which brings us to the second thing that I would talk to people about, which would be general liability insurance. And I'm going to bundle three coverages together here: general liability insurance, professional liability insurance, and abuse and molestation. And the reason I'm going to talk about those three coverages together is that they're typically bought together. So general liability insurance protects the organization for lawsuits about bodily injury, property damage, and mental anguish that you cause to others. But it excludes intentional injury and it excludes professional acts. So as a home health agency, the two of the biggest lawsuits that you may experience as an organization are going to have to do with accusations of lack of care and accusations of physical or sexual misconduct. So it's really important to think about general liability, professional liability insurance, and abuse and molestation, and just keep in mind that these three coverages are typically bought together in a bundle. The next coverage I would talk to you about would be crime insurance. That's what it's called. What it protects you for is going to be two things. One is employees stealing money from the organization. Depending on the size of the organization, you may not be all that concerned about that. One of the objections I will hear from people is that I'm talking to the owner, and the owner is the only person that handles money. And if that's the case, there's probably not a whole lot of need to be concerned about an employee embezzling money, but that is one part of crime insurance. But the other part that people do tend to care about a lot would be accusations of an employee going into a client's home and stealing something from them. Maybe jewelry, maybe some other type of collectible, but crime insurance, theft of clients' property insurance is really the coverage that you need to be thinking about. Now, the next two coverages I'm going to talk to you about are auto insurance and hired and non-owned auto insurance. Auto insurance is for vehicles that the business owns. So if the business does happen to own a vehicle, which I find to be somewhat uncommon for home health agencies, and the vehicle is titled in the name of the business needs to buy auto liability insurance. Now, hired and non-owned auto insurance is the type of coverage that most home health agencies I talk to need to think about, because the scenario that most agencies are concerned about is going to be a caregiver driving to a client's home and getting in an accident on the way, or transporting a client. Hired and non-owned auto insurance is coverage that sits on top of the personal auto insurance for the caregiver. It acts second. It always acts second. Anytime that you have an employee or someone else drive their personal vehicle on behalf of the business, that's going to be hired and non-owned auto insurance, and your insurance will act second. The personal auto insurance is going to act first. So keep that in mind as you're talking to your caregivers, and that make sure that they understand their personal auto insurance is going to act first. Which brings us to workers' compensation insurance. Since we're talking about employees, if you're going to pay people, if you have paid employees, you need workers' compensation insurance. Now, one area where I see a lot of home health agencies muddle things is they will have independent contractors, which it makes a lot of sense for this type of business. As I talk to the owners of home health agencies, a lot of caregivers want the flexibility to work at multiple agencies, which means it works better to pay them on a 1099. However, if your subcontractors or your independent contractors do not have their own workers' compensation insurance and they get hurt on your job site, your workers' compensation insurance is going to respond, which is also why if you have uninsured subcontractors or uninsured independent contractors and your workers' compensation company finds out, they're going to want to add the cost of those contractors to your total payroll. So just keep that in mind, because I've seen numerous home health agencies get bitten by that particular issue and they get surprised by a large audit. Which brings us to cyber insurance. Cyber insurance protects the organization if your data is breached and you have to pay for letters and credit monitoring services and damages to people whose data you are holding. Home health agencies have a lot of personal information, so it's not hard for me to think about how this could turn into a relatively large claim. One of the objections I'll hear from home health agencies is that they use electronic medical record system. The vulnerability is not in the system, the vulnerability is in your people. So you still need to think about what would happen if one of your employees allowed someone into the system that shouldn't be in there. Next, employment practices liability. There's a lot of turnover at home health agencies, and employment practices liability protects the organizations for accusations of wrongful hiring and firing practices. So, and if an employee comes back and sues you and says, you didn't give me the hours I wanted because I'm black, white, because I don't have a car, etc. That is wrongful hiring and firing. It happens all the time. The last coverage to think about is, and this is for large organizations, would be an umbrella. So if you are an organization with multiple $1 million of revenue and a lot of assets, people may think that there's a lot of money to come after, which means you should be concerned about lawsuits that are more than $1 million. An umbrella, it's not going to sit on top of all the policies we just discussed. However, it most commonly sits on top of general liability, professional liability, sometimes abuse, but not always, and auto insurance. So if you have a relatively large operation, you may want to consider more than $1 million of insurance. And the way you do that is to buy an umbrella. Thanks for listening. If you have questions, please reach out to me. And if this was helpful, please hit like and subscribe. It helps other people find the channel. And thanks for listening.